Hello and welcome for this new video in the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra, a collection of teachings on awakening, direct awakening, dating back to the Kashmir of the 10th century, or maybe 9th. So today, verse 34. That verse belongs to a group of verses about not visualization, but visions of light occurring mainly in the dark, and which is a very important part of the Kabbalah tradition. Kabbalah tradition is an esoteric tradition within esoteric Shaivism, within esoteric Tantra. So it's an esotericism to the square, if you like, and it has several central practices, of which the most famous one is the sexual practice, but it has also very important practices, core practices around breath and visions. So what we have here in the verse 34 of the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra and the following ones is probably coming from the Kabbalah traditions. So let's read first the Sanskrit verse. Om kapālāntar mano nyasya tiṣṭhan mīlitalocanaḥ. Mīlitalocanaḥ krameṇa manaso dārḍhyāt lakṣayet laṣyam lakṣayet uttamam. So, nyasya, having first projected, nyasa is a very important part of the tantric ritual practice. It means to install, to put in somebody or something, mantras, that is deities, because mantras are deities, and they can be installed first within the body, starting with the hand, and then with that mantric hand within the body or within anything, like a pot, like the ground, like a Shiva linga, like a statue, and so on. So having projected, having put manaha, one's attention, here manaha, manas, the mind, means attention, having put one's full attention, antaha, within kapāla, within the skull, within the head, within the skull. And the commentary, Shivopadhyaya's commentary, tells us here that within the skull means at the fontanelle, at the called also the opening to the absolute, Brahmarandra, the opening to the expanding one, the Brahman, Brimhati, the one who is ever expanding and ever expanded, sadoditam, satatoditam. So having put one's attention at the fontanelle, at the top of one's skull, tishthan, he, the yogi, or she, the yogini, if you will, shall stand, tishtet, mīlitalocanaḥ, with having one's eyes, locana, closed or gathered, mīlita, gathered, with the eyelids gathered, that is closed. Krameṇa, gradually. Dārḍhyāt, because of the stability, of the fixity, manaso, of attention. Lakṣayet, one shall get at. One shall get at. Uttamam, the supreme laṣyam, the supreme aim. In the Tantric yoga tradition, which is very, very rich and largely unexplored, there is a variety of aims, of laṣyam, of lakṣyas, which are objects of concentration, objects of attention. And so laṣya can also mean, in a secondary sense, anything that one should recognize or aim at in the spiritual path, in the spiritual life. So here the meaning of that word is the primary meaning, the meaning of something that one should focus on. And here the focus is on the fontanel, the top of the skull, that point, that opening to the ever expanding one. So there is nothing much obscure in that verse, but what is interesting is that the commentary connects that apparently simple concentration practice to the practice of visions. And he gives us a quote, the quote of Shiv Sutra in the third pada, in the third part, Sutra 31, as an axiom, a nyaya, a guiding axiom. Murdha jyotihi siddha darshanam. So by concentrating in the on the light in the head, so it's not just simply the fontanel, the top of the skull. Now it's the light, jyoti, in or on the head. One shall see the perfected beings, the siddha, the self-realized being, as it is sometimes translated. But one should not forget that siddha means also a type of celestial beings who are usually described in the Sanskrit literature, not only in the Tantras, but also in the general literature as well, as roaming in the sky, flying in the sky, not unlike the Kecharas, the skyfarers. So here it's an altogether different practice. It's just not just focusing on a point in the body or above the body, but rather evoking visions, not visualizing, not imagining, but seeing. It's darshanam, it's seeing something which is seen, which appears spontaneously of its own accord. And then he goes on to another interpretation. So he doesn't tell us much more about those visions. here in that commentary of verse 34, and then he skips to another type of interpretation, a philosophical one. So about those visions, we do not have much more in that first commentary, and the second commentary by Ananda doesn't tell us more. He just says that we should be an introvert. Mīlitalocanaḥ, he takes lochana as a word for all the faculties of the mind and body, both the indriyas, and he says that one should pratyahara, one should, or rather avrita chakshuhu, one should turn around one's attention to the inside, and he takes kapālāntar as meaning in the center of the skull, in the center of the head. So like turning around one's attention, the flow of one's attention inside to the center, in the heart. And the aim should be, rather than the fontanelle, should be that silence, that pure awareness, naked awareness that he says that shows herself when the in-breath and out-breath movements have stopped. So then one shall see the supreme light directly, and that supreme light is none other than the light of pure awareness, pure consciousness, universal consciousness, the light that lights up everything else. So it's a more philosophical interpretation, and Shivopadhyaya gives also that more philosophical interpretation, probably based on Ananda's interpretation. And first he quotes a verse that gives us nirukti, or a traditional etymology of kapāla, based on ka and pa, and ka and pa are Shiva and Shakti, Shakti and Shiva respectively. Pa for Palaka is the protector, Shiva, and so Kapala would mean the unity of the union of Shiva and Shakti. So kapālāntar would mean within the state of union and of Shiva and Shakti. And then he quotes a very famous line, which is quoted by everyone, by all the commentators within the Kashmir Shaiva tradition, which says that his Shaktis are the whole world, and the one who possesses them is the great Lord Shiva. So here again, a more philosophical interpretation, more symbolic. The first one speaks about the light which is seen, rather than just the light as a metaphor for awareness. So that light, he says, is swayam prakashi, is the spontaneous light. Prabhaswari is the clear light. This is again a Buddhist, rather Buddhist expression that we find in the Buddhist Tantras, which is in Tibetan is translated, is famous, quite common as ösel, a clear light, translated usually as clear light, which is present in kapālāntar. So this is here a very interesting and important hint, and it's I think it's it stands also for expressions like between the eyebrows, between the eyes, you know. It can be, it can mean the point within the eyes or within the eyebrows, but it can also mean the space in front of oneself, the space in which visions of light appear. So here, same holds for the Brahmarandra, the opening to the ever-expanding one. It can mean the fontanelle, it can mean that spot at the top of the skull, but it can mean as well the space in front of oneself, at which one would stare, like with open eyes, in the blue sky or in the dark, or staring at something flat, wide, like a wall, like a white wall. And doing that practice, one shall see colors and shape appearing, not unlike those that one can see when one pushes a little on one's eyes like this for a few seconds. A practice that will be spoken in the following verse, in one of the following verses. And so one stares just nakedly with open eyes, and visions appear and start to increase and develop. Geometrical visions, a little bit like psychedelic visions, but not exactly the same, not quite the same. And many tantras and kaula texts and tracts and extract that we have today speak of those visions, of the practice of staring into the sky and having those visions of light appearing more and more clearly, and in some parallel Tibetan traditions that we can find in Guhya Samajya Tantra, Kala Chakra Tantra, and then in the so-called Dzogchen Mengakde, it is said that those visions develop into full-fledged mandalas with full-bodied deities. And one consequence, two consequences of that practice, of those experiences, is that first, one's body and one's environment will be permanently transformed, perceived as made of light, which it is anyway, but not only the visual environment, but the whole experience is completely transmuted. And second, the inner experience, the mind disappears, the mind dissolves, and instead pure awareness lights up and reigns, and shall gradually take over the mind. So that is what seems to be said by that verse. And another evidence for that is the context, because we see that sometimes the verses of that collection, the verses are grouped by around a common theme, a common topic. And here the common topic seems well to be visions of light. So that is an argument in favor of an interpretation of that verse, not just being a concentration on a point of the body, but rather a concentration on the visions that appear when you stare nakedly in the dark, on the blue open sky, or on any homogeneous surface. So here we would have a practice of vision, and those practices of vision, they go well also with the practice of Shiva Mudra, Shambhavi, Bhairava Mudra, which is the practice of remaining with wide open eyes. And mīlitalocanaḥ here would be that practice with closed eyes or within full darkness, mīlitalocanaḥ. So that seems to make sense. Just a practice of staring at those shapes and colors that arise in the dark. We shall see more of that in the next verses and so in the next videos. Thank you for seeing and listening, and see you next time. Have a good day.